After my rebirth, I put all my thoughts on the college entrance examination and no longer entangled with my childhood sweetheart Brian. It was because of a fire in the laboratory in my previous life. I saved him at the risk of my life while he was rescuing the data, but I was seriously burned. Later, due to the rumors about my life-saving grace, he was forced to marry me, but Brian never loved me. I even heard his true feelings after I was drunk. If I had known that I would be locked in Ellie for the rest of my life, I would rather have been burned to death. I felt like I was trapped in an ice cellar. It turned out that for so many years, Brian had never forgotten his white moonlight. He even kept their love story from me and told the children. Even my children thought that I had ruined Brian's lifelong love and prevented him from getting what he wanted. When I opened my eyes again, I suddenly remembered Brian's young voice. "Ellie, if the situation is not right at that time, you must come to save me. But in this life, I just want to live well. I'm sorry, you have to take care of your own safety." Brian suddenly raised his head and looked at me with disbelief in his eyes. Even his steps that were about to rush to the laboratory stopped in midair. With a tone of disbelief, he asked me again, "Do you know what you just said?" "I am willing to let you save me, but you disagree." I said in front of everyone without hesitation, "Of course, there's so many people here. How can you, a grown man, insist on asking a little girl like me to save you? Brian, do you have any shame?" The crowd watching the excitement around me burst into laughter. In my previous life, because I heard Brian's cry for help, I rushed into the sea of fire without hesitation and carried him out. I even put my protective clothing on Brian's body, causing severe burns all over my body. Brian not only did not have any sympathy or pity for me, but he was even more disgusted with me. He said that he would have nightmares and couldn't sleep at night when he looked at me. He said that I was emitting a disgusting smell all the time. Finally, he said that if it wasn't for the fact that I saved his life, he wouldn't even look at me. But I endured all this silently because I felt that he was right. My burn appearance would scare people. But one day not long after, he suddenly proposed to me. Later, I found out Brian was in the critical period of the research laboratory for rating and promotion. Other colleagues attacked him with the fact that I saved him. Due to these rumors and the temptation of rating and promotion, Brian simply married me. At that time, I foolishly thought that this was the happiest beginning of my life, but I never thought it was the starting point of a nightmare. After marriage, he almost never slept with me and always said the most hurtful words. Until the end, he injected the virus from the festering wound into my body. Before I died in bed, I knew all his secrets. He didn't love me at all, and even hated me. He just married me for the rating and promotion. I looked calmly at the person in front of me. Brian, who was gradually getting angry and blushing, said again, "If you are afraid of death, don't go in. If you go in, don't expect me to save you." Brian stared at me fiercely, and his disgust for me was obvious in his eyes. "Ellie, don't worry, I won't ask you to save me even if I am burned to death. And please don't say anything else in the future. If we are childhood sweethearts, I can't afford to lose this person. You are a waste who can't even get into university. What qualifications do you have to be a childhood sweetheart with a gifted kid like me who just graduated from college and entered the laboratory?" I nodded without hesitation and agreed in his gloomy eyes. "Okay, as you wish." The fire was getting more and more intense, but Brian didn't dare to go in. He hesitated outside the laboratory for a long time, and every time he took a step, he was forced back by the fire. In his previous life, he dared to act recklessly because he had me, his trump card, who was desperately protecting him. Now that he saw that I didn't agree to save him, Brian, who cherished his own life, had no choice but to give up. After the fire was put out, all the results in the laboratory were almost destroyed. I turned around and went back home, took out my old high school textbooks, and started studying. It has only been a short time since the college entrance examination was resumed. In my previous life, I missed the university by just 1 point. Later, because of the burns all over my body, I felt inferior and didn't dare to take the college entrance examination again. In this life, I plan to use the next 2 months to find out the gaps and make up for all the shortcomings. That night, Brian, who didn't rescue the research materials from the laboratory in time, came to me in a rage. The door was knocked loudly by him. "Ellie, do you know that it was because of you that I was unable to save the research materials in the laboratory?" If I had saved the research materials this time, I could have avoided 10 years of detours. It was then that I realized that when I rescued him from the fire in my previous life, the fire was still small, and I could have evacuated safely. But Brian insisted that I go to the laboratory to rescue the research materials inside, which led to several serious burns on my body. After thinking everything through, I showed a look of sarcasm. I didn't stop you from going in at that time. Why are you blaming me now? Since you don't dare to go, you have to accept your fate. Don't try to take this shortcut. Brian's face sank, and fire flashed in his eyes. He glared at me fiercely, his voice was a little hoarse with anger, and he wished he could eat me alive. If you hadn't agreed to save me, would I have dared not to go in? I'm neither your father, nor your mother. Why should I pay the price for all your actions? I asked a question in return, which immediately stunned Brian. He pursed his lips unwillingly. Obviously, she was thinking about how to put the responsibility back on me. At this time, Diana, who lived in the next house on the street, opened the door and stood beside Brian indignantly. The two of them looked at each other in the air, almost drawing lines. Sister Ellie, this is your fault. Brother Brian is the only college student on our street, and he is also a highly educated person in the laboratory. You are just a worthless life. If you can save Brother Brian, it will be your blessing. Diana's words instantly stirred up all the emotions in my heart. Judging from this attitude, they've been entangled with each other for a long time. But later, in order to get a rating and promotion, Brian chose to marry the most annoying me. So in the end, he tortured me to death with resentment. Suddenly, I remembered that in my previous life, I couldn't sleep in the early morning several times, and I saw Brian's figure from the window of Diana's house. At first, I thought it was my illusion, so I told Brian about it. Unexpectedly, he laughed at me coldly. Ellie, with your ghostly appearance, I thought there was a ghost in the house when I opened my eyes. How could I sleep? My heart was like a dry sore with holes, and it was full of fine and dense colic. This look was not what I expected, not to mention that it was the scar left from saving him. Why should I be humiliated by him after I devoted myself to him? After the quarrel that night, the next day Diana spread the news on the street that my face scared Brian so much that he ran away from home. As a result, every time the neighbors looked at me, their eyes were full of weirdness and sympathy. This time I smiled sarcastically and no longer chose to give in. Then, why didn't Sister Diana risk her life? I saw you were there too, and you seemed to be deliberately avoiding us. This sentence immediately made Diana jump up and scold me like a cat with its fur standing on end. Ellie, what nonsense are you talking about? I think you have ulterior motives. You want Brother Brian to die in the fire, and you want to frame me. I smiled without comment and did not continue talking, but Brian's eyes became more gloomy. Finally, he said to me lightly, "This matter ends here. Ellie and I will go tomorrow to collect wild boar feces needed for the laboratory experiment, and I will forgive you." Hearing his words, I laughed immediately. It was exactly the same as in my previous life. Whenever anything involved Diana, he would always protect her and pass it over. But when it was my turn, I deserved to do anything for him. In my previous life, I stayed behind for a whole night for this wild boar feces. The burns on my body had not healed completely, and there were even signs of ulceration. But when I came back dirty with wild boar feces, Brian despised me and said that I had fallen into a toilet. What's more hateful is that Brian took all the credit for retrieving the wild boar feces on Diana. Diana was recommended by the laboratory to enter the university and went straight to work in the laboratory after graduation. The two of them lived together all day long, while I hid at home and couldn't see anyone. Thinking back to these past events, I bit the soft meat in my mouth until it was broken into pieces. A faint sweet and fishy smell spread on the tip of my tongue. I don't have time tomorrow. If you don't dare to go by yourself, ask Sister Diana to accompany you. She admires you so much, she should be happy to go with you. As soon as I finished speaking, Diana's face changed. He looked at me with extreme resentment, his eyes full of flames of resentment. Ellie, what do you mean? Now you are not willing to do something when Brother Brian asks you to do something. Are you still Brother Brian's childhood sweetheart? I smiled slightly and answered very calmly, I'm sorry, I really am not anymore. After saying that, I turned around and prepared to go back home to continue reading and reviewing. But Brian raised his furious eyes and stared at me. His eyes were wide open, and he rushed up and grabbed my arm tightly. His voice was filled with uncontrollable anger. Ellie, if you say you're not, then you are not. From childhood to adulthood, you have always said everywhere that you and I are childhood sweethearts. Now, when I ask you to do something, you are making excuses. Do you still realize it? I turned my face cold and sneered. Brian, have you forgotten that you said today that you and I are no longer childhood sweethearts? You are an intellectual known to everyone in the streets and alleys. I, a country boy who has not even been to college, am not worthy of you. A trace of panic flashed in his eyes, and I immediately shook off his hand and went home. I started reading a book on the table and faintly heard Diana's voice comforting Brian outside the room. Brother Brian, it's okay. Even if Ellie doesn't go with you, I will. It's just wild boar feces. You will definitely succeed with me here. Brian took a deep breath and looked at Diana with an even gentler look in his eyes. He glanced at me through the window vaguely. Diana, you're still the best. Unlike some people who only say things but don't really mean it. After he said that, even though I knew Brian did it on purpose, I still felt sad. I've paid for him for so long, but it's not as good as a kind word from Diana. The next day, before dawn, I went to the Education Bureau with my school bag on my back. In my previous life, after missing out on college, I asked how I could take the college entrance examination as a social youth and learned that I could apply for the exam with equivalent academic qualifications. It was only later, because of my horrible burns, that I gave up the idea. I quickly applied to the relevant department for an exam for equivalent academic qualifications. After working hard on the test papers for a whole day, I successfully passed the exam. I got the qualification to take the college entrance examination. On my way home happily, I happened to bump into Brian and Diana, who were coming down from the bus covered in dust. There were faint bleeding wounds on Brian's body, and his clothes were also torn. Seeing my smile, he thought I was laughing at him again. He got angry and rushed up to grab my wrist tightly. Ellie, what are you laughing at? If you were not unwilling to help me, how could I be chased by a wild boar and rolled down? I was not laughing at his affairs at first, but now I can't help laughing out loud. Brian's face was red with shame. He pulled me hard in anger and tripped me to the ground. He kicked me hard on the back and stepped directly over me. I am not someone you can laugh at. Ellie, I'll give you one last chance. You have 3 days to bring me back the wild boar feces, otherwise don't even think about me saying a word to you in the future. I never expected that he would suddenly attack me. The severe pain made me unable to get up for a while. I curled up on the ground, with dense cold sweat on my forehead. Diana also did the same thing, stepping over me and speaking to me in a sarcastic tone. Human mat, it's really comfortable to step on. After I told you not to go, you almost got bitten by a wild boar and disfigured today. As she said that, she was still not satisfied and pinched me with her toes. Enduring the pain, I turned over and threw her to the ground. Diana's scream made Brian rush back and slap me to the ground. Who gave you the courage to bully Diana? I bent over in pain and licked the corner of my lips that he had cut. I looked at him with indifference in my eyes. I didn't say a word and went home silently. I packed my luggage and rented a small house near the school. I applied for the status of a companion student from the school and started school every day. As for the 3 days that Brian gave me, I had long forgotten them. In the blink of an eye, it was the day of the college entrance examination. I didn't expect that I would meet Diana. She happened to be in the same examination room with me and looked at me arrogantly. Ellie, the university quota this time can only be mine. You'd better stop struggling, a loser like me. I said nothing and focused all my attention on the exam. Fortunately, my efforts during this period were not in vain. I was successfully admitted to the university. On the day when I received the university admission letter from the post office, I happened to meet the teacher who handled the equivalent academic qualification certification for me at the Education Bureau. She looked at me with regret and said, "Student Ellie, you have such good grades. Why do you give up the opportunity to enter the university?" I was stunned for a long time, then hurriedly stepped forward and grabbed her hand. "Teacher, I didn't give up on entering the university. Is there any misunderstanding? But didn't your fiancé take your household registration booklet and say that you were going to get married and gave up admission for you? He also asked us to send back the letter of giving up admission and the recommendation for supplementary enrollment. For a moment, I felt dizzy. I finally understood what Brian was planning. In my previous life, he and I were husband and wife. Brian always knew my ID number. With his connections, it couldn't be easier for him to get someone to retrieve my household registration booklet and forge it. Thinking of his previous life, he had already helped me drop out of school. This life would undoubtedly be even easier. As long as I took the initiative to drop out of school, then he would use his connections to recommend Diana to fill my place, and she would naturally occupy my university admission quota. Suddenly I understood, and it was like a stick that woke me up. I rushed forward and grabbed the hand of the comrade from the post office. This email cannot be sent out. I want to go to college. Besides, he and I have nothing to do with each other. He can't make the decision for me. My household registration book has always been at my home. It was forged. When the comrades from the post office heard that the national documents were forged, they were scared. They immediately went back and asked someone to stop the mail and call the police. Fortunately, the mail was stopped in time. When the police from the police station came, they asked me what happened. Not long after, I was sitting in the lobby of the police station, and I ran into Brian and Diana, who were brought back by the police. Diana's face was so pale from fear that she didn't even have any color. When Brian saw me, he immediately rushed to me, almost pointing at my nose and scolding, "Ellie, can you still have some shame? Did Diana do something to offend you? Are you going to frame her for breaking the law?" I clenched my fists, and my fingertips turned white. I looked at Brian with cold eyes. Was it illegal or not? The police at the police station can give us an answer. No matter how much you say now, you can't hide your guilty conscience. Brian, don't treat me like a fool. His face changed drastically in an instant. His eyes shook and his fingertips trembled. He watched Diana being taken in for investigation and started to play the emotional card for me. "Ellie, can we discuss anything in private? Some things don't need to be made so big. Also, if you give up the opportunity to go to college and give it to Diana, maybe I will be willing to give you a chance to marry me." He raised his head as if he was giving me alms and a great gift. Suddenly, I felt ridiculous. You just pointed at me and framed me. It hasn't been 2 seconds yet, and you say to discuss it in private. You forged my household registration booklet and made the decision to give up admission for me privately. Did you discuss it with me in private? What's more, I was the one who got into the university this time. Why should I give it to her? Almost at the same time, the police called Brian's name. "Is Comrade Brian here? Please cooperate with our investigation." 2 uniformed policemen walked in from outside the door. The 2 of them looked at Brian at a glance. At this time, Brian's face showed a look of horror, and he looked at me in disbelief, as if to say something like, "How dare you call the police?" Even Diana beside him lost the smug expression just now, lowered her head, and wished she could disappear in this room. "Comrade Brian, right? We are from the police station. Please come with us." One of the policemen said this again. Brian's face had become extremely ugly, and even his body was trembling slightly. But he still had a little luck, and he asked reluctantly, "I don't know what I have done wrong, and you still want to take me to the police station?" This time I didn't wait for the police to speak, but sneered and stabbed him with words, pretending to be my fiancé, stealing my household registration booklet, and wanting someone to replace my university place. With so many charges, don't you know what you have done? After hearing what I said, Brian couldn't sit still anymore and ran to me all of a sudden, with an indescribable tenderness on his face. He took my hand and whispered to me, "Ellie, we are already in this kind of relationship. There is no need for you to make such a big fuss over such a small matter. Besides, I am thinking about our future. As long as you give up going to college, I will get engaged to you right away. How about you go and withdraw the case first? I can't forgive you this time." He seemed to be certain that I dreamed of marrying him. His tone changed from cautious at the beginning to bossy now. I sneered in my heart and shook off his hand. In my previous life, I loved him deeply, but he treated me as a poisonous scorpion and wanted to kill me on the spot. Now he speaks in a high-sounding manner. "Isn't it just that you want me to withdraw the police report and give up the place to go to college?" Seeing that I didn't say anything, Diana, under the influence of Brian's little trick, also stood up and walked in front of me to trick me. "Sister Ellie, Why don't you agree to it quickly? Brother Brian finally agreed to get engaged to you. If you go to college, you won't have such a good opportunity. This time, I will help you go to college reluctantly. What she said was really nice. She wanted benefits, but didn't want to bear any psychological burden, as if she, Brian, was a rare good person. She wanted me to catch him quickly, but she seemed to be helping me to do something extremely difficult. I showed a bit of sneer and looked at Diana and Brian in a teasing manner. Since Brian is so good, then I will give him to you, Sister Diana. However, you should go to the police station now to explain why you replaced my place in the college entrance examination. Seeing that I was still holding on to this matter, the flames of shame and anger in Brian's eyes became more and more intense. In his heart, he had already bowed his head and said nice things to me, but I was still stubborn. His voice suddenly became several degrees higher. He looked at me with anger on his face and blurted out, "Ellie, do you really have to make me break off relations with you before you are willing to withdraw the case?" I stretched out my finger and shook it, denying it. "No, Brian, even if you break off relations with me, I can't withdraw the case." He froze in place in an instant, with an uneasy expression on his face, and his voice couldn't help trembling. "What did you say?" "I've already begged you so much, and you still want to pursue it? Ellie, do you really regard me as your childhood sweetheart?" Hearing this, I suddenly laughed out loud. At this point, he is still trying to use the emotional card as before to try to make me soft-hearted. It's just that I've suffered enough for being soft-hearted in my previous life. I shouted with a cold face, "I really didn't treat you as anyone related to me. Brian, you should bear the consequences of what you have done yourself. Don't dream that someone will solve it for you." After that, I no longer cared about Brian's terrified eyes, turned around and said to the police, "Comrade police, it was they who colluded to try to get my place in college, and they also stole my household registration booklet from my home. You must give me justice." As soon as the two policemen set their eyes on Diana and Brian, Diana collapsed to the ground with her whole body going limp. Brian was not having a good time either. Although he was holding on, his eyes were dazed. He was still dreaming that I would let him go. "No, Ellie, you can't do this to me. Now it's a critical period for me to be rated and promoted. You can't let my file be stained." I kept silent and watched them all being taken away by the police. Now I know I'm scared. What were you doing before? After Brian and Diana were arrested, the police station soon found out the whole process of the case. After all, it was a very clear thing. With their questioning and investigation, Diana and Brian could not hide this matter at all. The teacher from the Education Bureau also found me and told me the result of the handling of this matter. Diana used this conspiracy to replace the quota for going to college. She has been banned from participating in the college entrance examination and even has to go to jail. Although Brian escaped, he was still punished severely as an accomplice. The most important thing is that this matter was reported to the Institute, which completely deprived him of the hope of being rated and promoted by the Institute this time. After hearing the results of the two people's handling, I was not very happy. I just asked worriedly, "Teacher, since the matter has a result, there will be no changes in my going to college this time, right?" "Student Ellie, don't worry. We have handled the matter. You can continue to go to your university without any problem." Hearing this, the big stone in my heart finally fell. Just when I went home to prepare my luggage, wrapped the bedding with strapping tape, and wrapped the things with military green canvas tape, suddenly there were bursts of knocks on the door outside the room. I opened the door and saw Brian standing at the door with an embarrassed look on his face. His hair was messed up by the wind, and his coat was wet by the rain. After seeing me, he breathed a sigh of relief and looked at me with complicated eyes. He saw the prepared luggage behind me and asked, "Ellie, are you ready to go to college this time?" I stood there without saying a word. Brian pursed his lips and looked at me with an extremely repentant look. "It's very hard to go to college. There are endless books to read every day, and you have to take exams and do research." At this point, Brian changed the subject, "But since you have chosen to go to college, I will definitely support you. In the future, you just need to concentrate on studying. I will help you solve the problem of living expenses." I looked at him in hatred and surprise. This was not something he could say to me at all. He showed a face full of sneers and ridicule. "No need. This is my own business and has nothing to do with you. Besides, I am Ellie, the one you hate the most, not Diana. Don't recognize the wrong person. If there's nothing else, I will take a rest first. After saying that, I did not give Brian a chance to speak. I slammed the door shut. That night, Brian seemed to have never left. There was always a faint figure outside the window. The next day, I was carrying my luggage to catch the green train, and sure enough, I saw Brian standing straight outside the door. When he saw me, a haggard smile appeared on his face. Ellie, I'll take you to the station. I frowned tightly, not understanding what this man was trying to do. I had clearly explained it last night, but he seemed to have become a different person and kept pestering me. When I saw Brian was about to snatch the luggage from my hand, I clenched my hands and pulled it towards me fiercely, glaring at him with a frown and a vigilant look. Mr. Brian, what exactly do you want? I said I have nothing to do with you. Please don't bother me anymore. Brian showed a trace of sadness on his face. He frowned and hesitantly explained, No, Ellie, I just want to take you there. I didn't say a word to him again afterwards. I rode a 28-bar bicycle borrowed from home and headed towards the train station. Brian, who was totally unprepared, actually ran directly behind my bike. When we arrived at the train station, he was out of breath and his face was pale. But even so, I didn't even look at him. I locked the bicycle outside and waited for my parents to get home from work to pick it up. I carried my luggage and checked my ticket to enter the station. Suddenly, Brian behind me couldn't bear it anymore and stepped forward to grab my hand and asked me with gritted teeth, Ellie, are you back too? Otherwise, you would never treat me like this. I was shocked and subconsciously stopped and glanced back at him. Brian's face seemed calm, but his eyes were turbulent. After I came out of the police station, I suddenly remembered many things. Ellie, we were husband and wife in the previous life, and you saved me from the fire in the laboratory. I smiled calmly and pointed at his head. Brian, your brain is not working. You didn't go in that fire at all, and even if you went in, I couldn't save you. What's the previous life? Why don't you talk about the next life? Under his nearly collapsed look, I shook off his hand and walked onto the green train. Just as the train started to move slowly, he rushed over regardless of everything and was pinned to the ground by the security guard. Even so, he shouted at me, Ellie, stop pretending, I know you must be back. Although I don't know how Brian suddenly remembered these things in his previous life, I'm not curious at all, and I will not be moved by his current actions. In the previous life, he was the murderer who killed me. No matter what the reason, I can never forgive a person who killed me with his own hands. After sitting on the train for 2 days and 2 nights, I finally arrived at the city where the university is located. In the past, I heard from others how hard university life was, but when I stood in front of the university gate, I suddenly had infinite hope for the future in my heart. I started my university life for the first time in my past and present lives and met many classmates and friends. One day, when I went to the boiler room to get hot water to wash, my roommate suddenly found me and said that someone called me. I was still a little surprised about who was calling me. When I went to the dormitory and to answer the call, after hearing a faint gasp from inside, I knew who was on the other end of the phone. I have to say that Brian is really capable. He actually found out which university I attended and also found the landline number of my dormitory building. Brian, do you have something to talk to me about? Seeing that I directly called his name, Brian was no longer silent. Ellie, I am in Kyoto now. Can you meet me? There are some things I want to explain to you. He actually came to Kyoto. For a moment, I frowned. I'm sorry, I have a heavy workload and don't have time to go out to see you. You don't need to come out. Can I go in to find you? Before I could completely refuse, Brian couldn't wait to interrupt me. The research laboratory just happened to have a cooperation with your school. I came with the team. That's not necessary. I have something else to do, so I hung up first. Less than 2 seconds after I hung up, the phone rang again. I glanced at the number on the landline and unplugged the phone line directly. Only then did I quiet down. My roommate looked at me curiously. It was rare to see me have such an indifferent side. Ellie, that person just now was yours. Just an unfamiliar, annoying guy. But I didn't expect I wanted to stay away from Brian, but I couldn't avoid running into him at school. Because of my excellent grades in school, my tutor arranged for me to attend an exchange meeting. Unexpectedly, This exchange meeting was exactly what Brian said about cooperation. In a meeting room that was neither too big nor too small, Brian saw me sitting in the corner of the meeting room at a glance. His eyes seemed to be shining. He stared at me throughout the whole exchange meeting, without moving his eyes away for a moment. After the exchange meeting, his behavior was seen by my tutor, who asked him curiously, "Expert Brian, I see you have been looking at Ellie. Do you have any ideas?" Brian's eyes turned red for some reason, and his voice was a little choked. In fact, Ellie and I haven't seen each other for a long time. She and I grew up together, so we can be regarded as childhood sweethearts. Before I could say the words childhood sweethearts, I interrupted him coldly. Expert Brian and I live on the same street, so we are just neighbors who know each other better. As soon as the voice fell, the tutor nodded, but the light in Brian's eyes seemed to be broken and dimmed in an instant. At night, I couldn't resist my mentor, so I attended the party again. Brian wanted to sit next to me, but I blocked his seat. My mentor seemed to have noticed that Brian and I didn't get along, so he asked me what was going on. I said lightly, "Expert Brian is in love with a neighbor in his hometown. I'd better stay away from them so as not to get bad news back." My mentor nodded in understanding and then asked the distraught Brian to sit next to him. I ate 2 bites of the meal casually and slipped away with an excuse, but I didn't expect Brian to follow me. "Ellie, there's no need for you and me to be like this. In this world, we are the only 2 people who know each other well." My face turned cold, looking at the people coming and going in the restaurant, and it was not easy to argue with him. "I'm sorry, Expert Brian, I don't know what you were talking about. Every word I said just now was from the bottom of my heart. If I was disrespectful to you, please don't mind." At this point, I paused and then added, "The person who knows you best should be Sister Diana." Calculating the time, Sister Diana will be released from prison soon. You should think more about how to marry Sister Diana. This was later I heard the gossip from Diana's home. At that time, in order to clear himself of any involvement, Brian used marriage with Diana to make her willingly take all the crimes of replacing my place. That's why Brian's responsibility is so light. He glanced at me guiltily and didn't dare to reply to my words. In the previous life, I lived with him for so many years. Knowing my personality, Brian certainly saw my determination. His throat tightened and his voice was bitter. "The matter with Ellie was all misunderstanding. You know that the person I have always loved is." Under my teasing eyes, he still didn't dare to say the last word, "you." Whether in the previous life or this life, he has never loved me. Now the most is the unwillingness in his heart. In the previous life, I gave everything for him, but now I am avoiding him all the time, which makes Brian feel unwilling from the bottom of his heart. Expert Brian, it is better not to tell lies. Otherwise, you will suffer retribution. I didn't expect that my ordinary words would come true soon after. After graduating from university, I was hired by the laboratory as their technical director. I thought about it for a long time, but still couldn't refuse because the laboratory is the unit closest to home and the treatment is the best. In this life, Brian, who was not able to get a rating or promotion, suddenly became my subordinate. At the celebration party for my joining the laboratory, Brian seemed to have aged 10 years. He bowed his head and bent over and toasted me humbly, saying, "Congratulations, Ellie." I nodded and accepted everyone's celebration equally. That night, Diana, who got the news of my joining the laboratory from somewhere, showed up. The imprisonment in the past few years made Diana seem like a different person. The wrinkled face, dark skin, and bent body were completely different from before. Diana didn't dare to look me in the eye and grabbed Brian's collar tightly. "Brian, is it because Ellie is back that you regret it and are reluctant to marry me? Don't forget that I took the blame for you in the beginning. Do you believe me? I will publicize all this and make you lose face." Brian quickly reached out his hand to cover Diana's mouth, but it was too late. There was constant noise in the crowd, and many colleagues pointed fingers at the 2 of them. The leader of the laboratory had long been dissatisfied with Brian's actions and fired him the next day. I saw the 2 again on the way to work at the Research Institute a month later. Brian, who lost his job at the Research Institute, married Diana. In order to support his family, Brian had to start a roadside stall business. When I occasionally returned to the street, I often heard Diana scolding Brian, "You are a useless thing, and now you still want to be a crazy toad eating swan meat." You have been working in the research institute for so many years. Not only have you not saved a penny, but you have also been fired. Don't you see what level Ellie is now? He won't even look you straight in the eye. Later, I heard Brian's angry roar, as if he wanted to resist, but he was no match for Diana. Not long after, Brian, whose face was covered with claw marks, was kicked out of the door by Diana. The two saw me just outside, and were both stunned. Diana had a bruised eye. Obviously, she was beaten badly by Brian. She shut the door heavily and hid at home, fearing that I would find an excuse to punish her. Brian lowered his head, ashamed to face me, and ran away. Later, I learned that the two of them quarreled and fought almost every day. The worst time was when Brian beat Diana with a wooden stick, and her leg should have been broken. I shook my head when I heard the news. The person he loved so much in his previous life, he wanted to kill her in this life. But this has nothing to do with me. There is still a long way to go, and I should start over.